I'm Colin Marshall, host and producer of the podcast Notebook on Cities and Culture and author of the forthcoming book, A Los Angeles Primer, Mastering the Stateless City. Just like The Driver back in 1978, Drive opens with a downtown car chase. But it cuts to it, as it were, much sooner, and adheres even more closely to the cardinal rule of interesting car chases: vary the speed. As in Walter Hill's earlier film, this nameless wheelman, also known only as the Driver, delivers a couple of armed robbers to safety from an intensifying police pursuit, pulling off this evasion not just by flooring it, but by ducking strategically into the dark corners of downtown. Only he knows. Unlike a wholly ground-level film like The Driver, Drive uses the aerial aspect of Los Angeles as well, setting, for example, one of the LAPD's ever-present helicopters upon its hero. But it uses the perspective of a helicopter even more than it uses the threat of one. Here we have a movie that can't get enough of downtown, from the air, at night. This fits with Drive's sensibility, whose neon-lit flamboyance contrasts with the Driver's no-frills look and feel. Some even call Drive deliberately tacky, given its heavy use of that font that comes with Windows, and a soundtrack I once heard a friend liken to that of a gays-only opium den. But if this is tackiness, it's the tackiness of Los Angeles itself, one that goes so far that it comes around the other side, emerging into a strange kind of refinement. The Driver of Drive has similar differences from the Driver of The Driver. This newer film swaps out the central Ryan, Gosling for O'Neill, but he still plays a master of the city of equally few words and equally well-enumerated professional guidelines.
You don't need to know the route. You give me a time and a place, I give you a 5-minute window. Anything happens in that 5 minutes and I'm yours. No matter what.
Although I'd be lying if I said I didn't wonder why a man so protective of his anonymity would choose to wear that jacket.
Inicio, is that you?
This time, however, the Driver has a day job. Two, in fact. Not only does he work as a mechanic at a San Fernando Valley garage, he earns some money on the side as a stunt driver for the movies. A choice that lets Drive's story acknowledge Los Angeles' entertainment industry without getting absorbed into it. It also acknowledges Los Angeles' organized crime industry with a plot that ultimately ties almost every character to it in one way or another. In Drive's conception, the criminal element lies not in the inner city, but up in the suburban valley, the displaced heart of lawless Los Angeles. There we find a strip mall pizza parlor run as a front by Jewish gangsters of whom the Driver, his boss at the garage, and the incarcerated husband of his young mother neighbor run afoul. Where the Driver's driver kept his relationships with women strictly professional, Drive's driver gets involved, to the point where he takes the girl and her son for a field trip in the Los Angeles River. He even lends a hand when her man gets out of jail and the gang to which he owes money forces him to knock over a pawn shop, in of course the Valley, where an East Coast mob boss has stashed $1 million. The Driver works out the details of this job with a meeting in MacArthur Park, the real-life site of many a criminal negotiation over the past 40 years, and since I've lived here, the site of many of my negotiations over pupusas, but one we rarely see used for that purpose in the movies. In fact, the views from the Driver and the girl's apartment building suggest they live almost right next to MacArthur Park, though for some reason the script places it in another neighborhood, north of there.
He has been identified as Standard Gabrielle of Echo Park, Los Angeles.
If Drive follows in the tradition of The Driver, it follows equally in the tradition of films like Point Blank and The Outside Man, products of the short movement in the late 1960s and early 1970s, when European filmmakers came to Los Angeles and saw a city both deeply forbidding and deeply compelling. One with its own barely comprehensible set of rules, a thoroughly vulgar and criminal place that nevertheless offered the opportunity to tell stories they couldn't tell back home, in a style not even conceived of back home. That makes sense, since Drive's director Nicolas Refn comes from Denmark, a country about as dissimilar to Southern California as any I've experienced. That someone born and raised in such a mild-mannered place would develop the fascination with violence on display here doesn't surprise me, nor that he developed one with the now retro-seeming car culture his Driver lives and breathes. Word has it that Refn himself, at the time of Drive's release, had tried and failed to pass a driving test no fewer than 8 times. But could an everyday driver have possibly envisioned a Los Angeles like this? For more on Notebook on Cities and Culture, a Los Angeles Primer, or the City and Cinema, visit colinmarshall.org. The City and Cinema comes live to Portland, Oregon's Hollywood Theater on January 25th, 2015. Stay tuned for details.